Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Clayton Grimwood, and I've been a park ranger for 19 years. Most folks call me Clay. I've seen things in these mountains that would make grown men cry, but nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened at Wonder Lake in November of 1959. I guess I should start by telling you about myself. I'm 44 years old, served in Korea, and I know every trail within 200 miles of here. The Army taught me how to track, how to survive, and how to kill. The mountains taught me patience. But the war? The war taught me that sometimes you see things that aren't really there. Stress does that to a man. That's why I figured I was ready for anything Alaska could throw at me. Battlefield hallucinations prepared me for any mountain madness, or so I thought. The Wonder Lake District sits on the north face of Mount McKinley, about 95 miles from headquarters. It's lonely country, especially in November when the sun barely shows its face for 2 hours a day. The permafrost research station up there is my responsibility during winter months. Just me, a radio that works twice a day if I'm lucky, and enough supplies to last until spring. The Alaskan people have stories about this place. They call them Nakani cannibal giants who hunt during the long darkness. Old Joe Talkeetna told me those stories once, sitting by a fire outside Fairbanks. I laughed them off back then. Figured they were just tales to keep kids from wandering into the wilderness. I should have listened. November 15th started like any other day. Temperature was holding steady at 35 below, and the aurora was dancing green ribbons across the sky. I'd been monitoring the research station's equipment for 3 weeks without incident. Dr. Sarah Chen and her geology team were due to finish their ice core sampling and head back to Anchorage within the week. That's when I lost radio contact. The first day, I wasn't worried. Radio equipment fails all the time up here, especially during aurora activity. The electromagnetic interference can scramble signals for hours. But when the second day passed without word, my gut started talking to me. In Korea, I learned to trust that feeling. The morning of the third day, I loaded my pack and headed out, 40 miles to the research camp through some of the most unforgiving country on Earth. I brought my Army surplus radio, extra batteries, medical supplies, and enough food for a week. Standard rescue protocol. The silence hit me first. In 19 years of ranging, I'd never heard the mountains so quiet. No birds, no small animals rustling through the brush, no wind whistling through the peaks. Even my boots on the snow seemed too loud, like I was disturbing something that should stay sleeping. The temperature was dropping faster than it should have. My breath came out in thick clouds, and my compass needle kept spinning like it couldn't find magnetic north. Strange, but not impossible. Aurora interference, I told myself. Equipment malfunction. Then I found the tracks. 22 inches long, pressed deep into frozen ground that should have been too hard for anything to leave marks. The stride was impossibly wide, nearly 8 feet between prints. But what made my blood run cold wasn't the size, it was the pattern. These weren't random animal tracks. They circled the research station in a perfect hunting spiral, getting tighter with each loop. Whatever made them had been watching, planning, taking its time. I'd seen stalking patterns before, back in the war. Soldiers moving in on enemy positions. But no soldier had feet like these. The research camp looked like a bomb had gone off. 3 tents were shredded to ribbons, the fabric frozen stiff as board. Equipment scattered everywhere, computers, sample containers, personal belongings thrown around like a child's tantrum. But there was no snow inside the tents, which meant whatever did this had happened recently. Very recently. I called out for Dr. Chen and her team. My voice echoed off the mountains and came back empty. That silence pressed down on me again, heavier now, like something huge was holding its breath. That's when I noticed the blood. Dark red stains in the snow, already frozen but still visible. Too much blood for a simple accident. It led away from the camp in splashes and drag marks, following those massive footprints toward a stand of pine trees about 50 yards out. My hands were shaking as I checked my rifle. I'd carried it for protection against bears, But looking at those tracks, I was starting to think bullets might not be enough. The trail led me into the trees, where the shadows were thick and the aurora light couldn't reach. Pine needles crunched under my boots, too loud in the dead air. I followed the blood splatters, my heart hammering against my ribs. I found Dr. Martinez first. He was hanging from a tree branch 20 feet off the ground, his body twisted in ways that made my stomach turn. I'd seen men die in Korea, blown apart by mortars, cut down by machine gun fire, but this was different. This was deliberate, ritualistic. Someone or something had arranged him like a decoration, arms spread wide, head tilted at an unnatural angle. His research jacket was torn open, and deep claw marks ran across his chest. But it was his face that haunts me still. His eyes were wide with terror, mouth frozen open in a scream that would never end. I was reaching for my radio when I heard it, a low growling sound, like a bear, but deeper, more intelligent. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating through my bones. My radio crackled to life, but instead of static, that same growling poured through the speaker. That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with any natural predator. The growling stopped. The forest went silent again. But now I could feel something watching me. Eyes on my back, studying every move I made. My compass needle was spinning wildly, and my flashlight started flickering. I backed away from Martinez's body, rifle raised, scanning the trees. Nothing moved, but the feeling of being hunted grew stronger with each step. In Korea, we called it sniper sense, that prickle on your neck when death was looking for you. I made it back to the main camp and started searching the other tents. Found personal items, research notes, but no other bodies. Dr. Chen, Dr. Williams, and Dr. Reese were missing. The blood trail continued past the camp, deeper into the wilderness. That's when my radio exploded. Not literally, but every bulb in my flashlight burst at once, and sparks shot out of the radio speaker. The compass needle spun so fast it looked like a blur. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees in a matter of seconds. Through the aurora light, I saw it moving between the trees. Tall, impossibly tall. Maybe 15 feet, maybe more. It moved with a hunter's grace, staying just at the edge of my vision. When I turned my head to look directly at it, there was nothing there. But I could hear its breathing slow, deliberate, like it was tasting the air. I grabbed my pack and ran. Behind me, something laughed. Not human laughter, but a sound like breaking glass mixed with a wolf's howl. It followed me through the forest, never quite catching up, never falling behind. Playing with me. I'd been hunted by North Korean snipers, tracked through enemy territory for days at a time, but this was different. This thing wasn't just trying to kill me, it was enjoying my fear. I made it back to the research station just as the aurora exploded overhead in sheets of green and white fire. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out my backup radio and stopped my watch cold. But it also lit up the landscape like daylight, and I saw exactly what was hunting me. The thing stood at the tree line, maybe 100 yards away. 16 feet tall and thin as a scarecrow, but built like it could tear through steel. Its skin was pale as old ice, covered in frost that never melted. Long arms hung down past its knees, ending in claws that looked like broken glass. And its face, God help me, its face looked almost human. Almost. The jaw hung open too wide, showing rows of teeth, like a shark's. Its eyes glowed red in the aurora light, and they never blinked. It watched me for a long moment, head tilted like a curious animal. Then it smiled, and I saw Dr. Chen's research badge hanging from one of its teeth like a trophy. The creature turned and melted back into the forest, but I knew it would be back. I barricaded myself in the research station and tried to think. 4 people dead or missing. Radio equipment destroyed. Nearest help 5 days away, assuming the weather held. And something out there that could tear a man apart and hang him from a tree like a Christmas ornament. I'd seen the aftermath of Chinese night raids in Korea, soldiers found in pieces, arranged to terrorize the survivors. Psychological warfare, they called it. This felt the same, but worse. This thing wasn't just trying to break my mind, it was feeding on my terror. The attacks started just after midnight, first scratching on the walls, long, deliberate scrapes that circled the building. Then the roof started groaning under impossible weight. Something huge was up there, testing the structure, looking for weak points. A window exploded inward, spraying glass across the room. Through the hole, I saw a massive hand retreat into the darkness. The claws had left gouges in the window frame deep enough to stick my fingers into. I fired 3 shots through the opening. The muzzle flash lit up the night, but there was nothing there. Just my own echo coming back from the mountains. The laughter started again, but now it was coming from underneath the building. The thing was digging, or using tunnels I didn't know existed. Smart, patient. It had all the time in the world. Morning brought no relief. The temperature had dropped to 40 below, and snow was falling sideways in the wind. I found Dr. Williams outside the research station, or what was left of her. She'd been partially buried in the snow, arranged so I'd find her when I came outside for firewood. Her research notes were scattered around her body, pages fluttering in the wind like prayer flags. Someone had taken a bite out of her shoulder, a big bite. That's when I understood. This wasn't just killing for territory or defense. This thing was eating them. Doctor, Reese turned up that afternoon, about a quarter mile from the station. The creature had left him alive just long enough to crawl most of the way back to camp before finishing him off. His tracks in the snow told the story: dragged, released, hunted down again. The thing was playing with its food. I found claw marks on trees, territorial, markings like a bear might make. But these were deliberate, almost like writing, symbols I didn't recognize, carved deep into pine bark. They formed a rough circle around the research station, with me trapped in the middle. The creature was hurting me, keeping me penned in like livestock. As darkness fell again, I heard it moving around outside, testing the doors, probing the windows, looking for the best way in. Sometimes it would scratch at the walls, just to let me know it was there. Other times, complete silence that was somehow worse than the noise. Around midnight, it started calling to me, in Dr. Chen's voice. "Clay," it whispered through the broken window. "Clay, please help me. I'm hurt. I'm so cold." The voice was perfect Sarah's accent, her way of pronouncing my name. But I'd seen her badge hanging from its teeth. I knew what it really was. "Please, Clay. It's so dark out here. Let me in." I pressed my hands over my ears, but the voice seemed to come from inside my head. It knew how to use their memories, their voices. How long had it been watching them before it struck? How much had it learned? The truth came to me just before dawn, when exhaustion finally let my mind put the pieces together. The nuclear testing. We'd been detonating bombs underground for months, breaking through permafrost that had been frozen for thousands of years. The Alaskan stories weren't just legends, they were warnings about things that slept in the ice, waiting. We'd woken it up. The creature appeared at the window as the first pale light touched the mountains. This time, it didn't try to hide. It wanted me to see it clearly. 16 feet of nightmare, ancient and hungry. Its skin was the color of old bones, stretched tight over a frame that should have been impossible. The frost covering its body wasn't from the cold, it was part of the creature. Ice that formed wherever it touched. Its breath came out in clouds that sparkled with actual snow. But it was the intelligence in those red eyes that terrified me most. This wasn't some mindless monster. It thought, it planned, it remembered. And right now, it was studying me like a puzzle it was looking forward to solving. "I saved you for last," it said, and its voice was like wind through a graveyard. "The others were appetizers. You smell like war. Like fear. You'll taste much better." It pressed one massive hand against the window, and ice started spreading across the glass in spiral patterns. The temperature inside the building dropped 20 degrees in seconds. "I've been sleeping for so long," it continued, "dreaming of the hunt. Your bombs sang me awake, and now I'm so very hungry." The window shattered inward. The creature's arm reached through, claws scraping across the floor as it felt around for me. I scrambled backward, rifle in my hands, but bullets seemed like a joke against something that had survived for centuries under the ice. It squeezed through the window frame, impossible angles folding and bending as it poured into the room like liquid death. Up close, I could see the remains of its other victims frozen in its teeth, bits of clothing, jewelry, pieces I didn't want to think about. "I know you," it whispered, towering over me. "I can smell your nightmares. The war never left you, did it? The screaming, the blood, the friends you couldn't save. I'll make those dreams come true." It lunged for me with inhuman speed. I rolled aside and came up running, burst through the station door into the pre-dawn cold. Behind me, the building exploded outward as the creature gave chase. I made it 20 yards before it brought me down. The impact drove me face first into the snow. Claws raked across my back, shredding my coat like paper. I could feel its breath on my neck, cold as liquid nitrogen. This was it. This was how I died. But Korea had taught me one thing about dying: you don't go quiet. I rolled over with my last grenade in my hand, pin already pulled. The creature's eyes went wide with something that might have been surprise. It was smart enough to know what explosives could do. Let's see how you like napalm, you son of a bitch. The explosion knocked us both backward. The creature shrieked a sound like tearing metal mixed with a dying wail. Fire spread across its chest and arms, and for the first time, it looked hurt, but not dead, not even close. It rolled in the snow, putting out the flames, then stood up and looked at me with pure hatred. The fire had burned away some of the frost, revealing scarred flesh underneath that looked like it had been frozen and thawed 1,000 times. Clever, it hissed. But I've survived worse than your little war toys. I've been burned by lightning, buried by avalanches, forgotten by time itself. What makes you think your fire can stop me? It was right. The burns were already healing, new ice forming over the damaged skin. This thing was truly immortal, and I was just a man with an empty rifle and fading adrenaline. But sometimes being just a man is enough. I didn't kill the thing. That much needs to be clear from the start. You can't kill something that was never truly alive, something that exists in the spaces between life and death. But you can hurt it. You can make it remember that humans aren't just prey. The fire bought me time to reach my emergency cache: more explosives, flare guns, a radio transmitter with enough power to reach headquarters. I set the research station burning and called for immediate evacuation, reporting an avalanche and structural collapse. Nobody questioned my story. Who would? A veteran ranger with 19 years of spotless service doesn't just make things up. The creature watched me from the tree line as the rescue helicopter arrived 3 days later. It didn't try to stop them from taking me out. Smart enough to know that more humans meant more attention, more questions. It could wait. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital with burns and exposure, told the doctors I'd been caught in a fuel explosion while trying to repair a generator. They bought it. Hell, I almost believed it myself, but the nightmares told a different story. I never went back to Wonder Lake, couldn't. Every time I tried, my hands would shake and my vision would blur. The department transferred me to desk duty in Anchorage, said I'd earned an easier assignment after my heroic rescue attempt. The research station was rebuilt the following spring. New team, new equipment, better safety protocols. I wanted to warn them. But who would believe a story about cannibalistic giants awakened by nuclear testing? I'd sound like just another veteran cracking under pressure. 6 months later, the new team went missing too. Same pattern: destroyed equipment, massive tracks, bodies arranged like decorations. The official report blamed a rogue grizzly bear, even though grizzlies don't hang people from trees or leave claw marks that spell out territorial warnings. I started keeping files after that. Newspaper clippings, incident reports, anything that might be connected. Missing hikers near nuclear test sites, research teams vanishing in areas where permafrost had been disturbed. Always the same signs: impossible tracks, ritualistic arrangements, complete communications blackouts. We'd awakened more than one. The nightmares got worse. Not just Korea anymore, but that night at Wonder Lake, the creature's red eyes watching me sleep, its voice promising that someday, when I was old and weak and couldn't run anymore, it would come to finish what we started. I retired early, moved to a small cabin outside Fairbanks, where the population was dense enough that I'd never be truly alone. Bought dogs for company and early warning. Installed enough lighting to turn night into day. But sometimes, on the coldest nights, when the aurora dances overhead, I hear scratching on my roof. Long, deliberate scrapes that circle the building. And I know it hasn't forgotten me. The worst part? I think it's still learning, getting smarter. The attacks are more sophisticated now, more coordinated. It's not just hunting randomly anymore, it's building something. A territory, a kingdom of ice and fear. And every nuclear test, every drilling operation, every time we dig too deep into the permafrost, we risk waking up something else. My name is Clayton Grimwood, and I'm telling you this story because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand that there are things sleeping in the ice that should stay sleeping. Things that remember when the world was younger and hungrier. The bombs we're dropping underground aren't just testing weapons. They're breaking seals that were meant to last forever. And God help us all, they're working. The Nakanee are coming back. And next time, they won't be hunting alone. My name is Maria Bloodstone, and I need to tell someone what really happened in Alaska before they send me back to that place. I've been a park ranger for 6 years now. Started right after I got my PhD in wildlife biology from UC Davis. I'm the first Latina ranger they ever hired up in Alaska, which comes with its own set of problems. But I didn't move to the middle of nowhere to make friends. I came here to study brown bears and to get as far away from my old life as possible. The Valley of 10,000 Smokes isn't like anywhere else on Earth. It's this huge stretch of volcanic ash and steaming vents in Katmai National Monument. When the wind is right, you can smell sulfur for miles. The ground is warm under your feet even in winter. Sometimes the earth just breathes. You hear these low rumbles and see steam rising from cracks in the rock. Most people think it's spooky. I always found it peaceful. I was out there alone for my bear research project. My field camp sat about 60 miles from the nearest ranger station at Brooks Lodge. Helicopter came by every 10 days to drop off supplies and check on me. Between visits, it was just me, my equipment, and 47 brown bears I'd been tracking for 3 years. Each bear wore a radio collar. I knew them all by name. Big Tom, the 800-pound male who ruled the salmon streams. Sarah and her twin cubs, always playing near the thermal springs. Old Pete, missing half an ear from some ancient fight. They were my family out there. The Alutiiq people who lived here before us had stories about this place. My friend Joe from the village told me about the Kushtaka, shape-shifting spirits that looked like otters but could turn into men. They'd lure people into the water and drown them, then steal their skin to wear as disguise. Just machismo bullshit to scare women rangers, I told Joe. You trying to get me to quit? He didn't laugh. Some things been in these hills longer than people, Maria. Show respect. I should have listened. August in Alaska means 20 hours of daylight and peak bear activity. The salmon were running thick that year. Every day I'd check my monitoring equipment, take notes on behavior patterns, and update my research. It was good work. Honest work. The kind that let me sleep without dreaming about David's hands around my throat. That's why I came north in the first place. After I finally got brave enough to leave him, I needed somewhere dangerous enough to feel like punishment for being so weak for so long. Grizzly country seemed perfect. On August 15th, I woke up to silence. In 6 years of bear research, I'd never heard the valley completely quiet. There's always something, birds calling, water running, bears grunting as they fish. That morning, nothing. Even the volcanic vents seemed muted. I grabbed my radio gear and headed out to check on the bears. The first body I found was Big Tom. Someone had opened him up from throat to belly with surgical precision. No claw marks, no bite wounds, just one clean cut, like someone used a scalpel. His radio collar was still beeping, but it wasn't sending location data anymore. Instead, when I held the receiver close, I heard what sounded like human screaming. I found Sarah and her cubs next. Same thing, perfect cuts, no signs of struggle. They'd been arranged in a perfect triangle around one of the thermal springs. By noon, I'd found 12 more. All cut the same way. All arranged in patterns I didn't recognize, but somehow made my skin crawl. The smell of sulfur from the vents seemed stronger, mixing with the blood until I had to breathe through my mouth. This wasn't random killing. This was organized, professional. I radioed Brooks Lodge. This is Bloodstone at Valley Research Camp. I need immediate backup. We have a major poaching situation. Static answered me. Then, just for a second, I heard something like chittering, like otter sounds, but with words mixed in. Maria. Come. Play. I clicked off the radio and checked my tranquilizer gun. Full clip, 6 darts, loaded with enough ketamine to drop a charging grizzly. If poachers wanted to play games, I was ready. But when I found the tracks around Sarah's body, they didn't make sense. Boot prints led up to the bears, size 10, maybe 11. Heavy tread, like work boots. But halfway around the thermal spring, the boot prints changed to webbed otter feet. Big ones. Then those changed to wolf pads. Same stride length, same gait, like one creature had just shifted. I spent the next hour trying to make sense of the tracks. Maybe multiple poachers working together? Maybe they wore different animal feet to confuse investigators? But the spacing was wrong. The depth was wrong. One set of prints became another without any overlap or change in walking pattern. The radio crackled again. This time I heard my assistant Tommy's voice, but wrong somehow. Higher, pitched than normal. Maria? Where are you? I found something incredible near the north vents. Tommy wasn't supposed to be here for another week. His supply run was scheduled for the 23rd. Tommy? How did you get out here? Helicopter dropped me this morning. You didn't hear it? I hadn't heard anything except that awful silence. Stay where you are, I told him. Don't move until I get there. The north vents were a 30-minute hike through unstable volcanic terrain. Sulfur gas could knock you unconscious if you hit a pocket without wind. But Tommy was only 23, fresh out of college. Kid probably wandered too close to something dangerous. I found him sitting on a flat rock near the biggest thermal spring, still wearing his bright orange pack service jacket. From behind, he looked normal. Same shaggy brown hair. Same skinny frame. Tommy, you okay? When he turned around, his face was wrong. Not wrong like injured, wrong like rearranged. His eyes sat too far apart. His mouth stretched too wide when he smiled. And when he smiled, I saw too many teeth. Hi, Maria, look what I found. He pointed to the spring behind him. The water was full of bear parts, not random pieces, specific parts. All the missing radio collars floated on the surface, but the sounds coming from them weren't electronic beeps anymore. They were voices. Human voices, screaming for help. Isn't it beautiful? Tommy said, but his voice came from somewhere behind me. I spun around. Nobody there. When I turned back to the spring, Tommy was gone too. Just the collars, floating and screaming. I ran. Behind me, something splashed in the spring, something big. When I looked over my shoulder, I saw ripples spreading outward, but no sign of what made them. Back at camp, I tried the radio again. This time I got through to Ranger Station. Brooks Lodge, this is Bloodstone. Emergency situation at Valley Camp. Request, immediate evacuation. Copy, Bloodstone. What's your status? Unknown subjects on site, multiple wildlife casualties. Possible contamination from volcanic gases causing hallucinations. Copy. Superintendent Morrison is already en route for scheduled inspection. ETA, 20 minutes. I'd forgotten about Morrison's visit. Monthly check-ins were routine, but I'd never been happier to see another human being coming. Except when Morrison's helicopter landed, something felt wrong. The pilot looked normal enough. Middle-aged guy, standard Park Service uniform, professional demeanor. But he wouldn't look me in the eye, just stared straight ahead while Morrison climbed out of the passenger seat. Morrison looked exactly like he always did. 50-something, gray mustache, slightly overweight from too many desk years. Same uniform, same confident walk, same friendly smile. But when he shook my hand, his skin felt cold and damp, like he'd been swimming. Heard you're Dove. Having some trouble out here. Bloodstone. Yes, sir. Multiple bear casualties. Evidence of organized poaching. And, I hesitated. How do you tell your boss you think you're losing your mind? And, I think the volcanic gases might be affecting my perception. I've been seeing things that don't add up. Morrison nodded sympathetically. These remote assignments can be tough. Easy to start imagining threats. Why don't you show me what you found? We walked to Big Tom's body first. Morrison examined the cut with professional interest. Clean work, he said. Definitely human-made. But when he ran his finger along the wound, I noticed something. His fingernail was longer than it should be, sharper, almost like a claw. Sir? Your hand. Morrison looked down at his finger. For just a moment, his face went blank. Empty. Then he smiled again, but it was the same too wide smile I'd seen on Tommy. Just need to trim my nails, he said. Been meaning to get to. We checked 3 more bodies. Each time, Morrison seemed more interested in the cuts than the circumstances. He kept touching the wounds, almost caressing them. At Sarah's body, he knelt by the thermal spring and cupped some of the bloody water in his hands. "Minerals in these springs have healing properties," he said. The Alautique knew that. "Sir, that water is contaminated with—" Morrison drank it. He drank the bloody water like it was fresh from a mountain stream. When he finished, he looked up at me with eyes that reflected light like an animal's. "Tastes like home," he said. That's when I noticed his radio collar. Not a Park Service radio, one of my bear collars, hanging around his neck like jewelry. "Where did you get that?" Morrison touched the collar and smiled, but his mouth kept stretching, wider and wider, until I could see all his teeth. Too many teeth, just like Tommy. "From Big Tom," he said. And his voice sounded exactly like the screaming I'd heard from the radio. He gave it to me right before I skinned him. I backed away from Morrison, hand moving toward my tranquilizer gun. But he was faster than any 50-year-old desk ranger should be. One moment he was kneeling by the spring, the next he was standing right in front of me. "Now, Maria, no need for that." His voice was Morrison's voice, but underneath it I heard something else. That chittering sound from the radio, like otter calls mixed with human speech. "You're not Morrison." "Of course I am." He pulled out his wallet, showed me his Park Service ID. Perfect match. Same photo, same signature, same coffee stain on the lamination from when he'd showed it to me 2 months ago. "I'm exactly who I've always been, just improved." "What did you do with the real Morrison?" "I am the real Morrison. I have his memories, his knowledge, his authority. I know he divorced his wife Linda last spring. I know he's worried about budget cuts. I know he thinks you're doing good work out here, but worries you're too isolated." Everything he said was true. Details only Morrison would know. "But you also know how to skin bears with surgical precision." His smile stretched again. "That's new, a skill I acquired recently." "From who?" "From my family. They've been sleeping under the volcanic vents for a very long time, Maria. Your research awakened them. All that electronic interference from the radio collars, all the noise and disruption. We had to do something." I pulled the tranquilizer gun. "Stay back." Morrison laughed, but it sounded like water bubbling over rocks. "That won't help. But go ahead and try." I fired. The dart hit him center mass, delivered enough ketamine to drop a charging grizzly in 30 seconds. Morrison plucked it out like a splinter and ate it. "Tasty," he said. "But I prefer bear." Then he started changing. His skin rippled like water. His bones shifted and cracked. His face stretched forward into something like a muzzle, while his arms lengthened into something between human and otter. Dark fur sprouted along his neck and shoulders. But he kept Morrison's eyes, Morrison's memories. When he spoke, it was still Morrison's voice coming from that impossible throat. "The others are coming, Maria, my pack. We're going to clean this place up, make it ours again. No more radio collars, no more helicopters, no more humans." I ran toward my camp, but something was wrong with the landscape. The thermal vents were in different places. The paths I'd walked for 3 years led nowhere. Even the smell was different, less sulfur, more musk, like wet fur and old blood. Behind me, Morrison made sounds I'd never heard before. Not quite human, not quite animal. Like he was calling to something. Other voices answered from all around the valley. At my tent, I grabbed my emergency kit and satellite phone. The phone showed full signal. Strength, but wouldn't connect. Every time I dialed, I got the same sound, that chittering, like otters talking in human words. "Maria, come play. Maria, join us." The voices were getting closer. I loaded my remaining tranquilizer darts and checked my emergency flare gun, 6 flares. Maybe I could signal for help, maybe I could use them as weapons. Either way, I wasn't going down easy. That's when I saw Tommy again. He walked into my camp like nothing had happened. Same orange jacket, same young face. But now I could see what was wrong with him. His skin didn't fit quite right, like a suit that was too big. It wrinkled in places skin shouldn't wrinkle. And underneath, something else moved. "Found your camp," Tommy said in his wrong voice. "Nice setup." "You're not Tommy." "Sure I am. Got his memories and everything. I know he's from Portland. I know he wants to be a park ranger like you. I know he's scared of disappointing his parents. Tommy lifted his shirt. Underneath, his skin had been cut and sewn back together with rough stitches, like someone had opened a package and tried to reseal it. I'm wearing him, Tommy said proudly. Fits pretty well, don't you think? I fired a flare directly at his chest. The bright red phosphorus hit him and exploded into flame. Tommy screamed, but it wasn't a human scream. It was high-pitched and wild, like a wounded animal. He rolled on the ground, beating at the flames with hands that were now definitely claws. But the fire didn't spread like it should have. Instead of burning, Tommy's skin just melted away. Underneath was something dark and sleek, like a giant otter crossed with a wolf. It had Tommy's face stretched over its skull like a mask. The thing that used to be Tommy stood up on hind legs, towering 8 feet tall. Its eyes were black and wet, like deep water. When it opened its mouth, acid dripped from rows of needle-sharp teeth. That hurt, it said in Tommy's 24 voice. Now I'm angry. More shapes moved in the darkness around my camp. I counted at least 6, maybe more, all different sizes, but the same wrong proportions. Human intelligence behind animal features. Morrison's voice called from somewhere in the darkness. Don't hurt her yet. I want to talk. The thing wearing Tommy's face stepped aside as Morrison approached. But this wasn't the half-transformed Morrison I'd seen earlier. This was something that had given up pretending to be human. It walked upright like a man, but moved like water. Its skin was dark and sleek, covered in what might have been fur or might have been scales. The face was still recognizably Morrison's, but stretched over a skull that was the wrong shape entirely. You see us now? Morrison said. Really see us? Do you understand what we are? Kushtaka, I whispered. Smart girl. Yes, we are the Kushtaka. We have been sleeping in the thermal vents since your people first came to these lands. The volcanic activity, your radio equipment, all the noise and interference, it woke us up hungry. What do you want? What we have always wanted. To reclaim our territory, to feed, to multiply. Morrison gestured to the shapes surrounding us. Each human we take makes us stronger. We gain their knowledge, their memories, their access to your world. Soon we will have enough to spread beyond this valley. Why are you telling me this? Morrison's too-wide smile returned. Because you're going to help us. You know this place better than anyone. You have contacts throughout the Park Service, and most importantly, he reached out with claws that gleamed like obsidian. You're going to make a beautiful addition to our pack. I had 3 flares left, and whatever was left in my tranquilizer gun. Against 8-foot shape-shifting monsters, that wasn't much. But I'd spent 6 years in grizzly country. I knew how predators thought. You made one mistake, I told. Morrison, what's that? You woke up right next to the most unstable volcanic field in North America. Morrison's expression shifted. For the first time, he looked uncertain. I pulled the pin on my emergency flare and held it like a grenade. These thermal vents run on methane and hydrogen sulfide. One spark in the right place, and this whole valley becomes a fireball. You'll die too. I came here to die anyway. This just gives it meaning. The Kushtaka around me shifted nervously. Maybe they knew something Morrison didn't. Maybe they remembered what happened the last time this volcano really erupted. You're bluffing, Morrison said, but he didn't sound certain. I thought about David's hands around my throat, about 3 years of nightmares and self-hatred. About Tommy, just a kid who wanted to help save wildlife, now skinned and worn like a costume. Try me. Morrison started toward me. I lobbed the flare toward the biggest thermal vent, the one that had been rumbling all week. The flare hit the water and sank. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground started shaking. The Kushtaka scattered, their human disguises dropping away entirely as they ran. But Morrison stood his ground. Clever, he admitted, but you don't know what you're dealing with. We survived the last eruption. We can survive this one. Maybe. But can you survive it without skin? I fired my tranquilizer gun, but not at Morrison. At the emergency fuel canister for my camp stove, 20 feet behind him. The dart punctured the metal. Propane hissed out in an invisible cloud. Morrison realized what I'd done just as I fired my second flare. The explosion knocked me backward into my tent. When I looked up, Morrison was on fire, screaming in that inhuman voice as his stolen skin peeled away in burning strips. Underneath, the thing that had been wearing Morrison was beautiful in a terrible way. Sleek and dark, moving like living water, with eyes like black stars. It looked at me with something that might have been respect. "You would make a worthy predator," it said in a voice like wind over water. "Join us willingly, and we will give you power over all who hurt you." For a moment, I was tempted. The thing's voice promised strength, revenge, an end to fear and weakness. David's face flashed in my mind. How good would it feel to see him realize what I'd become? Then I thought about Tommy's parents, waiting for their son to come home. Go to hell. I fired my last flare at the main thermal vent. This time, the explosion was bigger, much bigger. The ground split open in a jagged line running straight through my camp. Superheated water and gas erupted 30 feet into the air. The Kushtaka that had been Morrison dove into the nearest thermal spring and disappeared. The others followed, abandoning their human skins like discarded clothes. Within seconds, the valley was empty except for me and the sound of the earth tearing itself apart. I grabbed my emergency pack and ran for high ground as more vents opened behind me. The helicopter pad was a mile away, on stable rock above the thermal field. If I could reach it, if I could signal for help. The ground shook again. A crack opened right in front of me, releasing a cloud of sulfur gas that burned my lungs and made my eyes water. Through the haze, I saw something moving in the superheated water below. They weren't dead. The Kushtaka were swimming through the underground thermal system like it was their natural element, and they were following me. I reached the helicopter pad just as my lungs gave out, collapsed on the metal landing platform, gasping in clean air while the valley burned behind me. But I wasn't alone. Tommy stood at the edge of the platform, no longer wearing human skin. Just the dark, sleek creature underneath, beautiful and terrible in the firelight. "You can't run forever, Maria," it said in Tommy's voice. "And you can't kill us. We are water. We are change. We are what your people call evolution." "Then why are you running?" Tommy smiled with too many teeth. "We're not running, we're spreading." Behind him, other shapes moved in the smoke. The Kushtaka weren't retreating. They were regrouping. "Every human settlement from here to Anchorage," Tommy continued. "Every park ranger, every tourist, every pilot who flies over our territory. We will wear their skins and learn their ways. By winter, half the park service will be ours." I pulled my emergency beacon and activated it. Somewhere overhead, satellites would triangulate my position and send help. "And you, Maria? You will be our teacher. You know all the ranger stations, all the protocols, all the people who trust you." The thing wearing Tommy's voice started toward me. I activated my last flare and held it between us. "Stay back." "Or what? You'll burn me again?" "Fire only makes us stronger. Pain only makes us hungrier." Tommy was right. I was out of weapons, out of options, out of time. But I wasn't out of ideas. I stood at the edge of the helicopter platform and looked down at the burning valley below. Thermal vents were erupting everywhere now, turning the valley of 10,000 smokes into something out of hell itself. "You're right," I told Tommy. "I can't kill you, but I can trap you." I jumped. I woke up 3 days later in an Anchorage hospital with burns over 40% of my body and a story nobody would believe. The official report said I'd been caught in a volcanic gas explosion that caused hallucinations and temporary psychosis. The bare deaths were attributed to unknown poachers who fled during the eruption. Tommy's body was never found, listed as missing and presumed dead. Superintendent Morrison visited me in the hospital. Same gray mustache, same friendly demeanor, same coffee-stained ID badge. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought he was exactly who he appeared to be. "Glad to see you're recovering, Bloodstone," he said. "Hell of a thing. What happened out there?" "Yes, sir. You saved a lot of lives with that beacon. Emergency crews might never have found the valley otherwise." Morrison sat in the visitor's chair and crossed his legs. "Normal human movement, normal human posture. Course, there's been some talk about your report. Shape-shifting creatures, possession, that sort of thing. People are wondering if maybe you need some time to recover fully." "I understand, sir. Good. Take all the time you need. We'll have a position waiting when you're ready." Morrison smiled, and for just a moment I saw too many teeth. When he left, I noticed wet footprints on the hospital floor despite the fact that it hadn't rained in days. They discharged me 2 weeks later. I moved to a small cabin outside Fairbanks, as far from thermal vents as I could get, while staying in Alaska. I still work for the Park Service, but only desk jobs now. Analysis, report writing, that kind of thing. I don't go into the field anymore. Every month, I get updates about Katmai. The Valley of 10,000 Smokes is closed to researchers indefinitely due to increased volcanic activity. No one's allowed within 50 miles of my old camp, but I still monitor the radio traffic. Late at night, when the atmospheric conditions are right, I sometimes pick up signals from that valley. Bear calls that sound like human words. Human voices that sound like animals. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear Tommy calling my name. The Park Service has hired a lot of new people over the past few months. Young rangers, mostly. Eager to work in remote locations. They all seem perfectly normal, perfectly human. But I notice things others don't. The way some of them never blink when they should. How their skin stays dry even in the rain. The fact that their footprints sometimes show webbing between the toes. I keep a flare gun in my desk drawer now. Salt water in a spray bottle. A crucifix my grandmother gave me, even though I'm not sure it helps. Because I know the truth about the pack of Katmai. They didn't die in that volcanic eruption. They adapted, they learned, and they're spreading. Last week, a new ranger transferred to our office from Yellowstone. Nice kid, just out of college, eager to help with wildlife management. Everything about him seems normal. Except when he introduced himself, he said his name was Tommy. And when he shook my hand, his skin felt cold and damp, like he'd been swimming. I start work early now, before the others arrive. I leave late, after they've gone home. I never eat lunch in the break room or attend office parties, and I never, ever shake hands. Because I know what's coming. The Kushtaka are patient. They're smart. They're already inside our defenses, wearing the faces of people we trust. By next summer, they'll have enough human knowledge and access to spread throughout the entire park system. Within 5 years, they could be anywhere. The thing is, I could stop them. I know where they're based, how they operate, what they're planning, but who would believe me? And more importantly, how do I know I'm still human enough to care? Sometimes I catch myself in the mirror and wonder if my reflection looks right. Sometimes I wake up with my sheets soaked in water that doesn't smell like tap water. Sometimes I find myself craving raw fish and thinking about how good it would feel to slip into a thermal spring and just let go. Maybe that's why they let me live. Maybe they knew that eventually I'd come to them willingly. Or maybe I already have, and I just don't remember yet. Either way, if you're reading this, stay away from Alaska. Stay away from any place with thermal springs or volcanic activity. And if you meet a park ranger who seems just a little too eager to help, who moves a little too smoothly, whose skin stays dry in the rain, run. Because the pack of Katmai is hunting. And they're always hungry. My name is Benjamin Ravencroft, and I've been a park ranger at Glacier Bay for 11 years. People always ask about the name. Yeah, it sounds made up, but that's what you get when your great-grandfather thought he was being clever. I wish I could say the Raven part was just for show, but after what happened in March of 1974, I'm not so sure anymore. I was 35 then, old enough to know better, but young enough to still think I was tough. The Coast Guard trained me well before I came here, rescue swimmer, cold water survival, all of it. I thought I'd seen everything the ocean could throw at me. Then that helicopter went down in '71, and I was the only one who made it out. 3 good men died that day because of ice conditions I should have seen coming. That's when I learned the water up here doesn't just kill you, it hunts you. But I told myself, the things I saw during those 6 hours in the water were just my brain trying to cope. Hallucinations from hypothermia. See, monsters don't exist, and the Tlingit stories about glacier demons are just old tales to scare kids. That's what I kept telling myself. Anyway, Moore Inlet is 45 miles from the main station at Bartlett Cove. It's one of the deepest fjords in Alaska, carved out by glaciers over thousands of years. The ice walls rise 300 feet straight up from water, so cold it'll stop your heart in minutes. In March, when the spring breakup starts, those walls come alive. You can hear them groaning and cracking day and night, like the earth itself is in pain. I was running Marine Patrol that month, checking on the research teams studying humpback whales. Dr. Sarah Chen had been out there for 2 weeks with her graduate students, tracking feeding patterns. Smart woman, careful with her equipment and her people. She knew these waters almost as well as I did. The radio call should have come in at 0800 hours on March 15th. It didn't. By 1000 hours, I was loading my patrol boat with cold weather gear and emergency supplies. The Times Ravens Call Times, yeah, I named it, and yeah, I see the irony now, was a 32-footer built for these conditions. Twin engines, heated cabin, enough safety equipment to rescue a dozen people from water that wanted them dead. The morning was clear, which should have been good news. 14 hours of daylight this time of year, and you could see the glacier faces from 20 miles away. But something felt wrong from the moment I left Bartlett Cove. The usual sounds were missing, no sea lions barking, no birds calling, just the rumble of my engines and the distant crack of ice. The water was too calm. In all my years up here, I'd never seen Glacier Bay this still. It looked like black glass, perfect, except for the chunks of floating ice. The temperature was right at freezing, cold enough that any mistake would kill you, but not cold enough to explain why my breath was forming crystals the moment it left my mouth. I found Dr. Chen's research vessel, the Times Cetacea *, anchored exactly where it was supposed to be. Engines running, lights on, equipment humming. No distress signal, no signs of trouble. I called out as I pulled alongside, but nobody answered. The silence hit me first when I climbed aboard, not just quiet silent in a way that made my ears ring, the kind of silence you get in a tomb. The deck was covered in a thin layer of ice crystals, even though the air temperature was above freezing. Inside the cabin, coffee was still warm in the pot, but it was starting to freeze around the edges. 4 people had been on this boat. Dr. Chen, 2 graduate students, and a photographer from National Geographic. All their personal gear was still here. Cameras, notebooks, even Sarah's lucky coffee mug that she never went anywhere without. But no people. I checked the radio logs. The last entry was from 0645 that morning. Unusual whale behavior observed. Subjects appear agitated, diving deeper than normal patterns suggest. Investigating. That was it. Nothing about trouble, nothing about leaving the boat. The life rafts were all accounted for. The emergency beacon hadn't been activated. The Zodiac boat they used for close-up work was still tied to the stern, but the motor housing was cracked open like an eggshell. Something had hit it from underneath, with enough force to split reinforced fiberglass. I spent 2 hours searching that boat, looking for any clue about where 4 people could have gone. That's when I found the sonar readings. Dr. Chen had been tracking a large object moving beneath the ice shelf. The readings showed something massive, 200 feet long, moving in patterns too complex for any known marine life. The last sonar image showed the object rising toward the surface. The timestamp was 0647 hours, 2 minutes after Dr. Chen's final radio transmission. I should have called for backup right then. Standard procedure, when you find an abandoned vessel, is to secure the area and wait for additional resources. But the radio was acting up, picking up strange interference that sounded almost like whale songs mixed with something else. Something that made the hair on my arms stand up. The Coast Guard helicopter was supposed to check in at 1400 hours. I waited, scanning the sky and trying to raise them on the radio. When they finally appeared, the relief hit me so hard I nearly fell over. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez had been my partner during my Coast Guard days. If anyone could help me figure out what happened to Dr. Chen's team, it was him. I guided them to a landing spot on a stable ice shelf about a quarter mile from the research vessel. But as their helicopter approached, the strangest thing happened. The water around both boats started to vibrate, like something huge was moving underneath. My depth finder was going crazy, showing impossible readings. The bottom seemed to be rising and falling in waves. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. "Ravencroft, we're getting some weird readings down here. Looks like there's a massive thermal layer moving beneath." The transmission cut off. I watched the helicopter shudder in midair, then spin violently to one side. It was exactly like what happened to us 3 years ago, the same sudden loss of control, the same sickening drop toward the water. But this time, I saw what caused it. Something erupted from the water beneath the helicopter. Not breaking the surface completely, but rising just enough to create a massive whirlpool. The helicopter was caught in the downdraft and pulled toward the churning water. I heard Rodriguez screaming over the radio, the same words he'd shouted during our crash. "Something's got us, something's pulling us down." The impact threw chunks of ice and metal across the fjord. By the time the spray settled, there was nothing left but debris floating in water that had turned black as oil. 4 more people dead, and I was alone again with questions that had no good answers. I tried to convince myself it was a freak accident, maybe a gas pocket released from under the glacier or some kind of seismic activity. But the water was still moving in that same unnatural pattern, like something large was swimming in slow circles beneath the surface. That's when I noticed the ice formations around Dr. Chen's boat had changed. What had been random chunks floating in the current were now arranged in perfect geometric patterns, triangles and spirals that looked almost like symbols. And they were glowing with a faint blue light that had nothing to do with reflected sunlight. I grabbed my binoculars and studied the patterns more carefully. They weren't random at all. Someone or something had arranged tons of floating ice into precise formations, but that was impossible. Moving ice chunks that size would take industrial equipment or incredible strength. The radio crackled to life again, but instead of voices, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Whale songs, but wrong somehow. Too complex, too organized. And underneath the whale sounds, I could swear I heard human voices screaming. My hands were shaking as I tried different radio frequencies, but every channel carried the same impossible mix of whale calls and human terror. Then, clear as day, I heard Dr. Chen's voice. "Ben, you have to get out of here. It knows you survived the crash. It's been waiting for you." But Dr. Chen was dead. Had to be. You don't survive 4 hours in water this cold, especially not if something had taken the helicopter down. I was backing my boat away from the research vessel when I saw the first tentacle. It rose out of the water about 50 yards away, easily as thick as a telephone pole and covered in what looked like armor plating made of ice. The thing moved with deliberate intelligence, feeling along the surface of the water like it was searching for something. For me. I gunned the engines, but the boat barely responded. The water around me was thickening, turning to slush despite the temperature being well above freezing. More tentacles appeared, creating a loose circle around my position. They didn't attack, they just waited, like they were herding me toward something. That's when I understood. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore, it was a hunt. And I was the prey. The tentacles disappeared as quickly as they'd come, sliding back into the black water without a splash. My boat's engines sputtered back to life, and the water returned to normal. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Hypothermia can cause hallucinations. Stress from finding the empty research vessel, seeing another helicopter crash, maybe my mind was just breaking down. Then I found the first body. Dr. Sarah Chen was embedded in the glacier wall, 50 feet above the waterline, not thrown there by an explosion, or washed up by waves carefully placed, like she was part of some grotesque art installation. Her body was perfectly preserved in ice, but her eyes were open and tracking my movement. When I called out to her, she mouthed the words, "Run, it feeds on fear." Dead people don't mouth words. Dead people don't move their eyes. I told myself it was an optical illusion, ice distorting her features, but when I looked through my binoculars, I could see the expression on her face clearly. Terror. Pure, absolute terror, like she was still experiencing whatever had killed her. I found the graduate student, Marcus, about 100 yards away. Same thing, embedded in ice, perfectly preserved, but somehow still aware. His mouth was open in a silent scream, and frost was forming patterns on his clothing that looked almost like writing. Tlingit symbols, if I was reading them right. Words I'd heard from the old fishermen, asterisk, Teakwidi asterisk. The hunger that comes from the ice. The third body was the photographer, suspended in a curtain of ice hanging from an overhang. But this one was different. Emma was moving, slowly turning her head to follow my boat as I passed beneath. When she saw me looking up, she raised one frost-covered hand and pointed toward the deepest part of the inlet. I should have left then. Should have radioed for backup, for the Coast Guard, for anyone. But my radio was dead now, completely silent except for static that sounded almost like breathing. And something was calling to me from the direction Emma had pointed. Not a voice exactly, but a pull I felt in my bones. The same feeling I'd had during the helicopter crash, when something had grabbed hold of our aircraft and dragged it down into the water. Something that had been waiting for 3 years to finish what it started. I followed the pointing finger deeper into the inlet, where the glacier walls rose so high they blocked out most of the sky. The water here was different, thicker, almost syrupy, and so clear I could see straight down to the bottom 200 feet below. What I saw there made me cut the engines and drift in silence. The entire floor of the inlet was covered in bodies, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all perfectly preserved in ice. Some wore modern clothes, but others looked like they'd been there for decades. Old fishing gear, military uniforms from World War II, even what looked like traditional Tlingit hunting clothes. All of them were arranged in the same spiral pattern I'd seen in the floating ice chunks. And they were all looking up at me. Every single face was turned toward the surface, eyes wide open, mouths forming the same silent word, asterisk, run, asterisk. That's when the water beneath my boat began to glow. A soft blue light that seemed to come from everywhere at once, illuminating the field of preserved bodies like some underwater graveyard. The light was warm, almost inviting, and I found myself leaning over the side to get a better look. Something rose from the center of the spiral, not breaking the surface, but coming close enough that I could see its outline through the water. It was massive, easily 200 feet long, with a body that seemed to shift between solid ice and flowing water. Tentacles thick as tree trunks writhed around a central mass that looked almost like a giant brain covered in armor plates. But the worst part was the eyes, hundreds of them, scattered across its body like stars in a clear sky. And they were all focused on me, with an intelligence that was old beyond imagining. This thing had been here long before the first humans crossed the ice bridge from Asia. It had been feeding on fear and death for thousands of years, preserving its victims in ice so it could drain the terror from them slowly, over decades. The creature spoke to me then, not with words but by showing me images directly in my mind. I saw the helicopter crash from 3 years ago, but from underneath. I watched this thing rise from the depths and grab our aircraft with tentacles I'd thought were just ice and debris. I felt the moment it tasted my terror and decided to let me live not out of mercy, but because fear tastes better when it's aged. It had been following me ever since, feeding off the nightmares and guilt that kept me awake at night. Dr. Chen's research team had just been bait to draw me back to the deep water where it could finish its meal. The Times Tequadi asterisk began to surface then, water cascading off its ice-armored body as it rose toward my boat. I could see now that what I'd thought were armor plates were actually the preserved faces of its victims, trapped in ice and still aware, still feeling the creature's hunger. My engines wouldn't start. The radio was completely dead. And something that had been hunting me for 3 years was finally ready to feed. The creature didn't attack right away. Instead, it circled my boat like a shark, letting me see exactly what I was dealing with. The Times Tequadi asterisk was beautiful in the way that avalanches are beautiful, terrible, and magnificent, and absolutely unstoppable. Its tentacles moved through the water with perfect grace, each one tipped with what looked like frozen human hands. The faces trapped in its ice armor were all people who had died in these waters, their final moments of terror preserved forever to feed the creature's hunger. But as it circled, I started to notice something else. The creature was limping. One section of its armor was cracked and blackened, like it had been burned. Fresh damage, recent damage. Something had hurt this thing, and hurt it badly. That's when I remembered the sonar readings from Dr. Chen's boat. She hadn't just been tracking whale migrations, she'd been hunting. The research team had figured out what was killing people in Glacier Bay, and they'd tried to fight back. I found the weapon they'd used bolted to the stern of the research vessel. A modified sonar array, powerful enough to shatter ice at a distance. Dr. Chen had weaponized her whale research equipment and actually managed to wound a creature that had been feeding here for centuries. But the Times Tequadi asterisk had learned from that attack. As I tried to start my engines again, I felt the water around my boat beginning to freeze. Not gradually, like normal ice formation, but instantly, trapping me in place. The creature rose higher, its main body breaking the surface for the first time. Water streamed off tentacles thick as subway tunnels, and the hundreds of eyes covering its body all focused on me with predatory intelligence. It spoke again, not in words, but in pure emotion, flooding my mind. I felt its hunger, ancient and patient, and absolutely relentless. I experienced the deaths of everyone it had killed over the centuries, their fear adding to its strength. And I understood that it didn't just want to kill me, it wanted to preserve me, like all the others, so it could feed on my terror for decades to come. The helicopter crash played out in my mind again, but this time I saw it from the creature's perspective. It had been sleeping in the deep waters when our aircraft passed overhead. The sound of our engines had woken it from a hibernation that might have lasted another century. But instead of attacking immediately, it had tasted my fear during those 6 hours in the water and found it interesting, complex, aged by guilt and trauma in a way that made it more flavorful than simple terror. So it had let me live, feeding off my nightmares from a distance, while it waited for me to return to the deep water. Dr. Chen's team had just been an excuse to draw me back. Ice was creeping up the sides of my boat now, and I could feel the cold seeping through my survival suit. My breath came out in clouds that froze and fell like snow. The creature's tentacles were rising higher, preparing to pluck me from my boat like fruit from a tree. But I was done being afraid. 3 years of nightmares, 3 years of guilt, 3 years of seeing my dead crewmates in every shadow. I was tired of being haunted. If this thing wanted to feed on my fear, it was going to get a surprise. Because the one thing I'd learned from surviving that helicopter crash was that sometimes the only way out is through. I grabbed the flare gun from my emergency kit and fired directly into the creature's main mass. The phosphorus burned white-hot against its ice armor, and for the first time, I heard the Times TQYD* scream. Not with sound, but with a psychic shriek that made my ears bleed and my vision blur. The ice around my boat cracked, and my engines roared back to life. I gunned them toward the research vessel, toward Dr. Chen's modified sonar array. The creature followed, its damaged armor plates glowing with bioluminescent fury, tentacles smashing through the water behind me. I reached the research vessel just as the Times TQYD* surfaced, completely. In full daylight, it was even more terrifying, a mountain of living ice and preserved death, hundreds of human faces staring out from its armor in eternal agony. But I could also see the weak points Dr. Chen had discovered. The joints between armor plates, where the ice was thinner. The neural clusters that glowed brighter when the creature was angry. I fired up the sonar array and aimed it at the largest cluster of eyes. The sound wave hit the creature like a physical blow, shattering armor plates and sending chunks of ice flying in all directions. More faces were revealed underneath victims from decades past, their preserved features twisted in endless screams. The Times TQYD* retaliated by wrapping a tentacle around the research vessel and crushing it like an empty can. But I was already diving into the water, my survival training taking over. The cold hit me like a sledgehammer, but I'd been in water this cold before. I knew how to survive it, how to use it, and that's when I realized something that changed everything. The creature wasn't just hunting me because of my fear, it was hunting me because I was the one who got away. In all its centuries of feeding, I was the only one who had ever escaped its grasp. My survival was proof that it could be beaten, and that made me more dangerous than any weapon. The water should have killed me in minutes, but something was different this time. The cold that had nearly destroyed me 3 years ago felt almost comfortable now. I could feel the Times TQYD's confusion as I swam through water that should have stopped my heart, moving with purpose instead of panic. I reached the creature's main body and found what I was looking for, the section Dr. Chen had damaged with her sonar attack. The ice armor was thin here, cracked like eggshell. I pulled out my diving knife and drove it deep into the fissure. The creature's scream shattered ice formations for miles around. I felt its psychic death cry wash over me, carrying with it the released souls of everyone it had preserved over the centuries. Hundreds of voices, maybe thousands, all crying out in relief as they finally found peace. The Times TQYD* began to sink, its massive body dissolving back into the water it had emerged from. But as it died, I felt something else, a warning, passed from its ancient mind to mine. This wasn't the only one. There were others, sleeping in the deep waters, waiting to be awakened by the sounds of human activity. And they were all hungry. I floated in the freezing water until a Coast Guard cutter found me 6 hours later. They said it was a miracle I survived, that the water temperature should have killed me in minutes. But I knew the truth. Something about my encounter with the creature had changed me. I could feel the cold now, sense the movement of deep water, hear the songs that glaciers sing when they're about to calve. The official report blamed the missing research team on a freak ice storm. Equipment malfunction explained the helicopter crash. Dr. Chen and her people were listed as lost at sea, their bodies never recovered. The truth would have sounded insane, so I kept it to myself. But I couldn't stop thinking about what the creature had shown me other times. TYD*, sleeping in deep water around the world, waiting for the right sounds to wake them. Marine research was expanding every year, with more powerful sonar equipment and deeper underwater exploration. How long before someone woke something they couldn't put back to sleep? I requested transfer to a desk job in Anchorage, telling my supervisors I needed time to recover from the trauma. But the truth was simpler. I was hunting, using my new position to track unusual incidents around the Pacific Northwest, looking for signs of awakening glacier demons. Because I'd learned something important during those final moments with the Times. TYD*. These creatures could be killed. They could be hurt. And sometimes, the only way to protect people from ancient horrors is to become something a little monstrous yourself. 3 months later, I got a report about strange whale behavior near Prince William Sound. Commercial fishing boats were going missing, and the few survivors talked about massive shapes moving under the ice. The descriptions were all too familiar. I loaded my gear into the Times Raven's call times and headed north. The water was calling to me again, but this time I wasn't afraid. I was ready. After all, someone has to stand guard between the deep places and the world above. And apparently, that someone is me. My name is Benjamin Ravencroft, and I hunt the things that hunt us. The water is patient, but so am I. My name is Samuel Darkwater, and I need to tell you what happened to me in the winter of 1983. I was 28 years old then, the youngest head ranger in Alaska. People called me a prodigy. 7 years in the wilderness, perfect safety record, survival instructor for new recruits. I thought I knew everything about staying alive in the wild. I was wrong. Gates of the Arctic National Park is a place most people never see. It's north of the Arctic Circle, where winter means 2 months without sunlight. The Arajech peaks rise like broken teeth against the sky. In January, the temperature drops to 60 below with the wind chill. It's a place where one mistake kills you. I loved it there. My specialty was solo long-range patrol. While other rangers worked in pairs, I went alone into areas where no human had walked for months. I mapped wildlife populations, checked on emergency supply caches, and monitored the caribou migration routes. The isolation never bothered me. I preferred. The local Inupiat people had stories about these mountains. They called it the home of the Wendigo, a spirit that turns men into cannibalistic demons. I laughed at those stories. Stone Age psychology for cannibalism taboos. I told other rangers. I had a degree in wildlife biology. I believed in science, not superstition. That January, I was assigned a 30-day solo patrol through the northern section, 150 miles from the nearest settlement. No radio contact possible due to the mountains. It was routine work: check the emergency caches, document any unusual animal behavior, survey the winter caribou population. I packed my gear with military precision. The new GPS unit. Cutting-edge technology in 1983. Emergency food for 40 days. Arctic survival equipment I could set up blindfolded, rifle, ammunition, medical supplies, everything organized and tested. The morning I left, the aurora was dancing across the sky in strange patterns, geometric, shapes that didn't look natural. The other rangers mentioned it, but I didn't pay attention. Aurora activity was common that far north. I started hiking before dawn on January 15th. The snow crunched under my boots like broken glass. My breath came out in white clouds that froze instantly. The cold bit through my face mask. But I was used to it. This was my element. The first 3 days went perfectly. I covered 20 miles each day, following my planned route through valleys between the peaks. The GPS worked fine. I found the first emergency cache exactly where it should be, everything normal. On the 4th day, I found my own footprints. They were in the snow ahead of me, leading up a ridge I had never climbed. Fresh prints, maybe 6 hours old. The same boots I was wearing, the same stride length. But I had been asleep 6 hours ago, in my tent, 3 miles away. I stared at those prints for a long time. In the wilderness, you learn to trust your eyes completely. These were definitely my tracks. But I had never walked here. I followed them. The prints led up the ridge in a straight line, like I had known exactly where I was going. At the top, they stopped at a pile of rocks arranged in a circle. Inside the circle was meat, fresh caribou, cut into careful strips and laid out to freeze. I didn't remember killing a caribou. I didn't remember building this cache. But the knife cuts looked like my work. I stood there in the wind, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. In 7 years as a ranger, I had never lost time or forgotten my actions. My memory was perfect. It had to be, for survival. I checked my GPS. It showed my position 50 miles south of where I actually stood. That was impossible. Even if the unit was broken, it couldn't be that far off. The rational part of my mind took over. Equipment failure. The aurora activity was stronger than usual. Maybe it was affecting electronics. The cold could cause strange malfunctions. I had been stressed lately, working too many double shifts before this patrol. Stress could cause memory lapses. I decided to continue the patrol using traditional navigation. Compass and landmarks, the old ways that had worked for centuries. But I kept the meat. Wasting food in the Arctic was deadly stupid, no matter how confused I was about where it came from. That night, I made camp in a protected valley. I cooked some of the caribou meat over my camp stove. It tasted strange, gamey, and rich, with a flavor I couldn't identify. But I was hungry, and protein was protein. I wrote in my logbook. Day 4. Equipment malfunctions due to aurora activity. Found emergency food cache. Weather holding steady. I didn't mention the footprints. In official reports, you stick to facts you can explain. I slept badly. Strange dreams of running through the snow, chasing something that stayed just ahead of me. In the dreams, I was incredibly hungry, but no amount of food could fill the emptiness in my stomach. Day 5 started wrong. When I checked my gear, I found my emergency radio was broadcasting, not receiving, broadcasting. When I turned it on, I heard my own voice talking about coordinates and supply drops. But I wasn't speaking. I switched it off quickly. Radios could pick up strange signals in the Arctic. Atmospheric reflections, military transmissions from hundreds of miles away. It didn't mean anything. But the voice had sounded exactly like me. I packed quickly and started hiking. The weather was getting worse, wind picking up, temperature dropping. I needed to reach the next supply cache before the storm hit. I found it 2 hours early. According to my map, the cache should have been 8 miles ahead. But there it was, a familiar orange marker poking through the snow. I dug it out and opened the container. Inside were supplies I didn't recognize, food I hadn't packed, equipment that wasn't standard issue. And, at the bottom, wrapped in plastic, was fresh meat. Not caribou this time. The texture was different, softer. I unwrapped it carefully. The meat was cut into neat strips, like jerky. But jerky was usually made from venison or beef. This looked different. I was a wildlife biologist. I knew animal anatomy. I had processed hundreds of specimens. This wasn't caribou. It wasn't moose or deer. The strips were too uniform, too pale, and there were what looked like fingernail marks in the flesh. My hands started shaking. Not from the cold. I threw the meat into the snow and stepped back from the cache. My breathing came fast and shallow. In the wilderness, panic kills faster than cold or hunger. I forced myself to calm down. Someone was playing a sick joke. Another ranger had gotten here first and planted fake evidence. It had to be that. People did crazy things in isolation. Practical jokes that went too far. But the cache had been sealed, no signs of tampering, and no one else was authorized for this sector. I repacked everything except the strange meat and continued hiking. The wind was howling now, driving snow horizontally across the landscape. Visibility dropped to 10 feet. I put on my emergency goggles and kept moving. That's when I heard the hunting call. It came from behind me, carried on the wind. A long, high wail that didn't sound like any animal I knew. It was definitely not human, but there was something almost familiar about it. The sound came again, closer this time. Whatever was making it was following my trail. I picked up my pace. In a blizzard, getting separated from your route was death. But something was tracking me, and I needed to reach shelter. The storm got worse. I could barely see my compass. The GPS was still showing impossible readings, sometimes placing me in Canada, sometimes showing no signal at all. I was navigating purely by instinct now. After 2 hours of fighting through the wind, I found a shelter, a natural cave formed by fallen rocks. I squeezed inside and set up my emergency bivouac. The cave was just big enough for me and my gear. As I was unrolling my sleeping bag, I found something in the back of the cave, a journal, wrapped in waterproof plastic. The cover was marked with my initials. I had never seen it before. I opened the journal with numb fingers. The handwriting inside was definitely mine, the same slanted script I had used since college. But I didn't remember writing any of it. The first entry was dated 3 days ago. The hunger is getting stronger. Found tracks of 2 hikers heading toward Arajech Pass. Young couple, probably inexperienced. They won't survive the storm anyway. Might as well make use of the meat. My blood went cold. I would never write something like that. I was a park ranger. My job was to save hikers, not whatever this was suggesting. I flipped through more pages. Entry after entry in my handwriting, describing, stalking people through the mountains, planning how to kill them, detailed notes about where to cache their bodies. The final entry was from yesterday. Darkwater is fighting me more now. He doesn't remember what we do together yet, but he's getting suspicious. The caribou meat I left for him wasn't enough. He needs to taste human flesh willingly, or the change won't complete. Tonight when he's sleeping, I'll bring him fresh prey. I dropped the journal like it was on fire. This was impossible. No one else could write in my handwriting. And the journal talked about me like I was a different person. Outside the cave, the hunting call came again. Much closer now. I grabbed my rifle and crawled to the cave entrance. Through the blowing snow, I saw a shape moving toward me, tall and thin, walking upright but wrong somehow. The way it moved wasn't human. As it got closer, I could see more details. It looked like a person, but stretched out, too tall, too skinny. Its arms hung down past its knees. And its face. It had my face. The thing stopped 20 feet from the cave and stared at me with my own eyes. But they were wrong. Yellow instead of brown, with pupils that reflected light like an animal's. "Hello, Sam," it said in my voice. "Did you enjoy the meat I left you?" I raised my rifle. "Stay back. I don't know what you are, but stay away from me." It smiled with my mouth, showing teeth that were too sharp. "You know exactly what I am. I'm you, the real you, the one who's not afraid to do what it takes to survive." "That's not true. I would never hurt people." "Look around, Sam. We're alone in the most dangerous place on Earth. No laws here, no society, just hunger and cold and the need to survive. I'm what you become when you stop pretending to be civilized." The thing started walking toward me again. "You've been eating well these past few days. Did you wonder why you weren't hungry? Why the meat tasted so good?" My stomach dropped. The caribou. The strange, rich flavor I couldn't identify. "No," I whispered. "Yes. Sarah and Mike Peterson, from Fairbanks. They got lost in the storm 2 weeks ago. I found them before they froze. Waste not, want not." I pulled the trigger. The bullet hit the thing's center mass, but it didn't even slow down. It just looked down at the hole in its chest and laughed. "You can't kill me, Sam. I'm part of you now. I've been growing stronger every day, every night when you sleep. Soon you won't be able to tell which one of us is real." It reached the cave entrance. Up close, I could see that its skin was covered in frost that never melted. Its breath came out in clouds, but there was no warmth in it. The Inupiat have a name for what I am, Wendigo. But they're wrong about how it works. I don't possess people. I am people. The part they try to hide. The thing reached out with one long arm and touched my face. Its fingers felt like ice, "Stop fighting me, Sam. You're hungry. You're always hungry now. Let me feed us." Something inside me wanted to listen. There was a gnawing emptiness in my stomach that hadn't gone away since I started eating the mystery meat, a hunger that normal food couldn't touch. I jerked away from its touch. "No, I won't hurt innocent people." "Innocent?" It laughed again. "There are 6 hiking permits filed for this area in the next 2 weeks. 6 groups of people who have no business being in the wilderness in winter. They're going to die anyway, Sam. We can make their deaths mean something." I scrambled deeper into the cave, but there was nowhere to go. The thing followed me slowly, like it knew I was trapped. You felt it when you ate the meat, didn't you? The satisfaction. The way it filled the emptiness inside you. Regular food will never be enough again. It was right. I had been hungry constantly since starting this patrol, even after eating full meals. Like my body was demanding something specific that I couldn't identify. Until now. "I can smell them," the thing said. 3 days hike south, a family with 2 children. They're lost, running out of food. Scared. The meat will be tender from the fear. Stop. I was crying now, though the tears froze on my cheeks instantly. "Please stop. You're going to help me, Sam, because deep down, you want to. You're tired of playing protector for people too stupid to protect themselves. Tired of risking your life for strangers who don't appreciate the sacrifice." The worst part was that some of what it said made sense. I had saved dozens of inexperienced hikers over the years, pulled them out of situations their own carelessness had created, and most of them never even thanked me properly. "That's it," the thing said, sensing my wavering. "Let the anger in. Let the hunger in. Stop pretending you're better than what you are." I closed my eyes and tried to think of something else. My training, my oath as a park ranger, the families of the people this thing wanted me to kill. When I opened my eyes, the cave was empty. But I could smell something cooking outside, meat roasting over a fire. And I was so hungry. I crawled out of the cave on my hands and knees. The storm had stopped, and the sky was clear. Stars shone down through the thin air, and the aurora danced in sheets of green and blue. 20 feet away, a campfire burned. The thing that looked like me was crouched next to it, turning strips of meat on a makeshift spit. The smell was incredible, rich and savory, making my mouth water uncontrollably. "I thought you might be hungry," it said without looking up. "This is from yesterday's hunt, a solo hiker who thought he could cross the Brooks Range in winter. Natural selection at work. I wanted to be sick. I wanted to run. But my body betrayed me, taking step after step toward the fire. The hunger was like a living thing inside me, demanding to be fed. This is how it starts," the thing explained calmly. "The Inupiat stories got it backwards. The Wendigo doesn't make you hungry for human flesh. Being hungry for human flesh makes you into the Wendigo." I was close enough now to see the meat clearly. It was definitely not caribou, too pale, wrong texture. But it smelled so good. "The transformation happens slowly," it continued. "First the hunger, then the dreams. Then you start doing things you don't remember. Eventually, there's no difference between you and me. We become the same person." "How long?" I managed to ask. "For you?" 6 more days, maybe 7. You're strong-willed, but the hunger always wins in the end." It held out a piece of the cooked meat. "Eat willingly, and it happens faster. Less suffering that way." I stared at the offered food. My stomach cramped with need. I hadn't realized how desperately hungry I was. When was the last time I'd eaten? This morning? Yesterday? "The missing hikers," I said. "How many?" 6 so far this winter. All people who shouldn't have been out here anyway. Darwin Awards in action. 6 people dead. 6 families who would never know what happened to their loved ones. Because something was wearing my face and using my skills to hunt them. "But you're not just something," it said, reading my thoughts. "I am you. The you that you've always been, deep down. Remember when you were 12 and you found that injured rabbit? You were supposed to take it to the vet, but instead you watched it die. You wanted to know what death looked like." I did remember that. I had told my parents the rabbit died before I could get help, but really, I had just watched. Curious about the process. Or when you were 20 and you let that drunk hiker wander off the trail instead of stopping him. He fell off a cliff 6 hours later. You could have saved him, but you decided his stupidity wasn't your problem. That memory hit me like a punch to the gut. I had told myself there was nothing I could do, that he was too drunk to listen. But the truth was, I hadn't tried very hard. You've always been this way, Sam. The ranger thing is just a costume you wear. Deep down, you think most people deserve what they get. The meat smelled so good. I was so hungry. No, I whispered. I became a ranger to help people, to protect them. You became a ranger to be alone in the wilderness, where you don't have to pretend to care about people, where you can let your real nature show. I looked at the thing, at myself, crouched by the fire. It was right about some things. I had always preferred solitude. I did think most hikers were careless idiots, and there had been times when I'd made questionable decisions about who deserved help. But that didn't make me a monster. Even if that's true, I said, I won't kill innocent people. I won't become what you are. It shrugged. You already are what I am. You just haven't accepted it yet. The thing stood up, and I saw its full height, 9 feet tall, emaciated but powerful. Frost covered its skin in patterns that looked almost decorative. When it moved, ice crystals fell from its body like snow. The family I mentioned is closer than I thought, it said. I can smell their fear. They're about 2 miles from here, huddled in a snow cave, running out of food. The children are crying. It started walking south. Come along, Sam. Time for dinner. I followed. I tried to tell myself I was going to protect them, that I could somehow stop what was about to happen. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was following because I was hungry, and I wanted to eat. The hunger was everything now. It filled my thoughts, drove my movements. Each step toward the family made it stronger. I could almost taste the meat already. We found them exactly where the Wendigo said they would be. A father, mother, and 2 young children, maybe 8 and 10 years old. They had built a pathetic shelter from snow blocks and were burning their last few pieces of firewood. The father saw us first. Thank God, he called out. Are you park rangers? We've been lost for 3 days. The Wendigo smiled with my face. We're here to help, it said in my voice. But I was the one who stepped forward. I was the one who spoke to the family, telling them everything would be okay. The Wendigo just watched, because there was no difference anymore. We were the same person. The father's name was David. His wife was Jennifer. The children were Emma and Tyler. They had been camping when the storm hit, and their GPS had failed. They were experienced hikers, just unlucky. Good people, innocent people, and I was going to kill them. What happened next is hard to explain. I had 2 sets of thoughts running at the same time. My normal mind, horrified by what I was planning, and the Wendigo mind, calculating the best way to separate the family members. I heard myself offering to lead them to safety, saw myself suggesting we split up to cover more ground, felt my hands checking my knife to make sure it was sharp. But some small part of me was still fighting, still trying to resist. When David turned his back to help his son with his backpack, the Wendigo part of me started to reach for the knife, but the human part made my hand freeze halfway to the blade. What's wrong? David asked, noticing my strange posture. I looked at him. Really looked. He had kind eyes, worried but still trusting. He believed I was there to save his family. His children were looking at me like I was their hero. Run, I whispered. What? Run, I screamed. Take your family and run south. Don't look back. David's survival instincts kicked in. He grabbed his children and started moving. Jennifer hesitated for 1 second, staring at me in confusion, then followed her family. The Wendigo part of me was furious. I felt like I was at war with myself, 2 minds fighting for control of one body. The hunger was overwhelming, demanding that I chase down the family and feed. I started running after them. My body moved without my permission, gaining on them quickly. The children were small, couldn't move fast in the deep snow. I was 10 feet behind them when I managed to stop myself. Keep going, I yelled. Don't stop until you reach the highway. I watched them disappear into the trees. Safe, for now. But the hunger was still there, stronger than ever, and I knew it would never go away. I hiked back to my original patrol route and finished the assignment. I filed my reports, claiming equipment failures had caused the navigation problems. I never mentioned the missing hikers or what I had learned about myself. The official records show that 6 hikers went missing in Gates of the Arctic that winter. Search teams never found the bodies. The cases were closed as death by misadventure. I know where the bodies are. Sometimes, on the longest winter nights, I visit them. I transferred to a desk job after that patrol, told my supervisors I wanted to focus on administration rather than field work. They were disappointed. I had been their best wilderness ranger. But they didn't argue. I couldn't risk going back into the wild, not with the hunger still growing inside me. It's been 3 years now. I've learned to manage the condition. Raw meat helps. Helps, not human, but fresh game that I hunt myself. The hunger never goes away completely, but it becomes tolerable. I monitor the missing persons reports from Alaska's wilderness areas. 6 hikers disappeared last winter, 8 the year before. The numbers are growing. I'm not the only one infected. The Wendigo spreads like a disease, passing from ranger to ranger through isolation and desperation. We're supposed to be the guardians of the wilderness, but we're becoming its predators instead. I keep detailed records now. Names, locations, symptoms. Someday, maybe someone will find them and understand what's happening. The worst part is how normal I feel most of the time. I go to work, pay my bills, have conversations with colleagues. I seem like a regular person. But underneath, the hunger waits, patient and constant. Sometimes I catch other rangers watching me with yellow eyes. Sometimes I see them writing in journals they don't remember keeping. The infection is spreading through the service, one person at a time. And somewhere in the Brooks Range, something wearing my face is still hunting, still feeding, still growing stronger. I tell myself it's not really me out there, that the Wendigo is a separate entity that just looks like me. But I know the truth. We are what we always were. The wilderness just strips away the lies we tell ourselves about human nature. The family I saved that night, David, Jennifer, Emma, and Tyler, they made it to safety. I checked the records. They never filed a complaint against the Park Service, never mentioned meeting a strange ranger who told them to run. Maybe they convinced themselves they imagined it. Maybe they were too scared to report what they saw. I hope they stay out of Alaska. I hope they never go hiking again. Because next time, I might not be strong enough to let them go. My name is Samuel Darkwater. I was a park ranger. And I need you to know, when you go into the wilderness, you're not alone out there. We're watching, we're hungry, and we're waiting. My name is Diana Nightshade, and I used to think government conspiracy theories were just paranoid delusions. That was before I found out what they were really hiding in Alaska. I've been a park ranger for 4 years now, but before that, I spent 8 years with the FBI. Criminal investigation was my specialty. Forensic analysis, federal law enforcement coordination, the whole 9 yards. I was good at my job, maybe too good. That's probably why I ended up here, 80 miles from the nearest town, investigating something the government desperately wants to stay buried. It's October 1991, and I'm standing on the edge of the Malaspina Glacier in Wrangell Street, Elias National Park. This place is massive. We're talking about the largest non-polar glacier complex in the world. The ice stretches out in front of me like a frozen ocean, and right now, with only 12 hours of daylight and winter storms rolling in, it feels like the loneliest place on Earth. I chose to work alone. After what I discovered in my FBI days, the cover-ups, the files that mysteriously disappeared, the cases that got shut down from above, I don't trust easily anymore. The official story is that I'm investigating some missing hikers. The truth is, I'm looking into a pattern of disappearances that goes back decades. The Athabaskan people who lived here for thousands of years have stories about this place. They talk about something called the Jish, shadow beings that steal human souls. I used to think those were just old stories, ways to explain things people didn't understand. Now I'm not so sure. My radio crackles. Nightshade, this is base. Any sign of the missing researchers? I press the button. Negative. But I found their campsite. You need to see this. What I don't tell them is that the campsite looks like it was abandoned in a hurry. Food still warm in the pot, tent zippers open, sleeping bags undisturbed, but no footprints leading away, no signs of a struggle. It's like 3 grown men just vanished into thin air. I pull out my forensic kit, habits die hard. The FBI trained me well, and I still carry the best equipment I could get my hands on. As I start processing the scene, something catches my eye. There are marks in the snow around the camp, but they're not footprints. They look more like shadows. Dark impressions in the snow that shouldn't be there. I take photos, measurements, samples, everything by the book. But there's something about this place that makes my skin crawl. The silence is wrong. Even in winter, there should be some sound, wind, ice creaking, something. But it's dead quiet, like the glacier is holding its breath. That's when I notice the research equipment. Government issue, high-tech stuff that researchers from the University of Alaska shouldn't have access to. Serial numbers that trace back to military contracts. I'm photographing everything when I hear it, a sound like ice cracking, but it's coming from above me, not below. I look up and see nothing but gray sky. But the sound continues, moving in a pattern that doesn't match any natural glacier movement I've ever heard. It's almost like footsteps, big ones. I pack up quickly and head back to my snowmobile. Something is very wrong here, and I need to check those government contracts I've been tracking. The pattern of disappearances always seems to happen right before classified research projects show up in the area. That can't be a coincidence. As I start the engine, I catch movement in my peripheral vision. Something dark sliding across the ice, moving too fast to be a person but too purposeful to be natural. By the time I turn my head, it's gone. The ride back to my cabin takes 2 hours, and I spend every minute thinking about what I've seen. The missing researchers, the government equipment, the strange marks in the snow. In my FBI days, this would have been the start of a federal investigation. Now, working alone, I have to be more careful. I've been building a case file on these disappearances for months. The pattern is always the same. People go missing, government researchers show up, the area gets classified for environmental studies, and then everyone forgets it happened. But I don't forget. I can't. Back at my cabin, I spread out the photos and documents on my kitchen table. The research contracts are particularly interesting. They're not for environmental studies at all. They're for something called Project Shadowfall, a program I've never heard of, funded by departments that officially don't exist. I'm studying the serial numbers on the equipment when my radio crackles again. All units, be advised. Weather Service is calling for severe storm conditions. All personnel return to base immediately. I look out the window. The sky is clear. That's when I realize the radio call isn't from my dispatch. The voice is wrong, and the protocol is all off. Someone is trying to get me to leave the area. That means I'm getting close to something they don't want me to find. The storm hits 3 hours later, but it's not the kind of storm the Weather Service predicted. This one comes from the wrong direction, and the snow falls in patterns that don't match any meteorological phenomena I've studied. It's like the storm is being controlled. I'm reviewing the case files when the lights flicker. Then they go out completely. Emergency backup kicks in, bathing my cabin in red light. Through the window, I can see the storm swirling around my cabin, but it's not touching the surrounding area. It's focused on me. That's impossible, but I'm looking at it happen. I try the radio, dead static, satellite phone, no signal. Even my emergency beacon is down. I'm completely cut off, and someone wants it that way. I check my service weapon, a .40 caliber Glock, standard FBI issue that I never turned in. Full magazine, one in the chamber. Whatever's coming, I'll be ready for it. The knock on my door comes at midnight. 3 knocks, perfectly spaced, too soft for the wind. I grab my flashlight and weapon, moving carefully toward the door. Who's there? No answer. But the knocking continues, that same slow rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. I look through the peephole and see a man standing in the snow. He's wearing the standard gear of the missing researchers, but something's wrong with his face. It's too pale, and his eyes are completely black, not the iris, the whole eye. Dr. Matthews? I call out. He was one of the missing researchers. The man doesn't respond, but he tilts his head at an angle that no human neck should manage. Then he smiles, and I see that his teeth are too sharp and too many. I step back from the door, weapon raised. Stay back, identify yourself. The knocking stops. I wait, listening to my own heartbeat and the storm outside. Then I hear something that makes my blood freeze, the sound of my door unlocking from the outside. I didn't give anyone a key. The door swings open slowly, and the thing that looks like Dr. Matthews steps inside. It moves wrong, like it's not used to having joints and muscles. Its feet don't quite touch the ground. "Agent Nightshade," it says, and its voice sounds like it's coming from underwater. "You've been asking questions." I keep my weapon trained on it, but I'm backing toward the rear exit. I'm not an agent anymore, and you're not, Dr. Matthews. The thing wearing his face smiles wider. No, Dr. Matthews is elsewhere, but his memories are useful. Did you know he was trying to expose us? Expose what? The partnership. Your government has been very cooperative. They provide subjects, we provide services. A mutually beneficial arrangement. I reach the back door with my free hand while keeping the gun pointed at the creature. What kind of services? Information extraction, soul harvesting, dimensional, research. It takes another step closer, and I can see that its shadow doesn't match its body. The shadow is huge, stretching across my entire cabin ceiling. Dr. Matthews discovered our breeding facilities. He was going to make trouble. Where are the other researchers? Being processed. The creature's head tilts again, and this time I hear its neck crack. As you will be, Agent Nightshade. Your federal training makes you valuable. I hit the back door handle, but it doesn't move. Locked from the outside, I'm trapped. The creature takes another step, and now I can see what's really in front of me. The human appearance is just a mask. Underneath, something dark and massive is folding itself into a space too small to contain it. The air around it shimmers like heat waves, and the temperature in the cabin drops 20 degrees. I fire 3 rounds center mass. The bullets pass right through it like it's made of smoke. The creature laughs, and the sound makes my windows rattle. Physical weapons are ineffective, Agent. We exist partially outside your dimension. I'm out of options, so I do the only thing I can think of. I kick over my propane heater, sending it crashing into my generator. Sparks fly, and the whole cabin plunges into absolute darkness. In the dark, I hear the creature shriek, not in pain, but in confusion. It seems disoriented without light to cast its shadow. I use the opportunity to kick out my kitchen window and dive through it into the storm. The snow is coming down hard now, but I can see my snowmobile under the tarp. I sprint across the open ground, expecting to feel claws in my back at any second. Behind me, red light flares as my cabin catches fire. I reach the snowmobile and rip away the tarp. The engine turns over on the second try, and I gun it into the storm without looking back. In my mirror, I can see something dark and enormous rising from the flames of my cabin, too big to be contained by the building's walls. I drive blind through the snow, following memory and instinct. The creature, or whatever it really is, can't be working alone. Someone in the government is helping it, providing cover, feeding it researchers. This goes deeper than I thought. My snowmobile headlight cuts through the storm, and I see something ahead that shouldn't be there. Lights in the glacier where no lights should exist. Some kind of facility built into the ice itself, hidden from aerial surveillance. As I get closer, I can see it's not just a research station. It's a complex, sprawling underground through the glacier with multiple levels and security checkpoints. Government vehicles are parked outside, and I can see armed guards patrolling the perimeter. This is what Dr. Matthews found. This is what got him killed. I cut the engine and coast to a stop behind an ice ridge, pulling out my binoculars. Through the scope, I can see inside the facility through reinforced windows. There are dozens of people in lab coats working with equipment I don't recognize. And there are other things moving in the shadows between them, tall, dark shapes that don't cast reflections. My radio suddenly comes to life. "Agent Nightshade, this is Director Hayes, FBI. You need to come in immediately." Director Hayes was my boss 8 years ago. He's been dead for 3 years. I know better than to answer that radio call. Whatever's speaking through my radio, it's not Director Hayes. But the fact that something is using his voice tells me this conspiracy goes back further than I thought. I need to get inside that facility and find out what they're really doing here. The missing researchers, the government contracts, the creatures, it's all connected to whatever's happening under the glacier. I circle around to approach from the north side, where the ice provides better cover. The facility is bigger than it looked from a distance. I count at least 5 levels carved into the glacier, with vehicle access tunnels and what looks like a helicopter landing pad built into the ice itself. The security is military-grade. Motion sensors, thermal cameras, armed patrols, but I notice something strange. The guards are wearing winter gear, designed for temperatures much colder than what we're experiencing, like they're expecting the ice to get a lot colder. I wait for a patrol to pass, then move closer to one of the access tunnels. The entrance is protected by a keypad lock, but I still have my federal access codes from my FBI days. Worth a shot, the code works. The door slides open with a soft hiss, and warm air flows out. I slip inside and find myself in a sterile corridor that looks more like a hospital than a research facility. The walls are lined with observation windows, and I can see into laboratories filled with equipment I don't recognize. In the first lab, a team of researchers is working with what looks like shadow samples, $100, actual pieces of darkness contained in specialized chambers. The shadows move on their own, pressing against the glass like they're trying to escape. In the second lab, I see something that makes my stomach turn. Human subjects strapped to tables, unconscious, with wires and tubes connected to their heads. Machines are extracting something from them, a faint, glowing substance that gets collected in storage units marked with biohazard symbols. Soul extraction. The creature wasn't lying. I take photos with my camera, documenting everything. This is evidence of human experimentation on a massive scale. But who's running this, and why is the government involved? I move deeper into the facility, staying in the shadows. The corridor leads to an elevator bank with access to all 5 levels. I choose level 3, deep enough to avoid casual traffic, but not so deep that I can't escape if necessary. The elevator opens onto a section that looks different from the labs above. This level is older, carved directly from glacier ice, and the air is much colder. The walls are covered with symbols that look like a mixture of government insignia and something much older. The same symbols I've seen in Athabascan legends about the Jish. I'm studying the symbols when I hear voices approaching. I duck into an alcove and listen. The harvest from the last batch exceeded projections. A man's voice says, "We should have enough processed souls to complete the enhancement program." "What about the ranger?" A woman's voice. "She's asking too many questions. The Jish are handling her. By morning, she'll be another missing person, and we can add her federal training to the collective knowledge base." They pass by without seeing me, but their conversation confirms my worst fears. The government isn't just covering up these creatures, they're working with them, using them to extract information and abilities from victims. I follow the corridor to its end and find myself looking through a reinforced window into an enormous chamber carved deep into the glacier. What I see inside changes everything I thought I knew about this situation. The chamber contains dozens of the shadow creatures, the Jish, but these are different from the one that attacked me. These are bigger, more solid-looking, with technological implants grafted into their bodies. They're wearing some kind of harness system that seems to amplify their abilities, and they're not alone. Government technicians are working alongside them, adjusting the equipment, running diagnostics. This isn't an investigation or containment, it's a partnership. I watch as they bring in a new subject, one of the missing researchers, Dr. Chen, still alive but unconscious. They strap him into a device that looks like a cross between a medical scanner and an electric chair. The enhanced Jish gather around him, and the machine activates. What happens next will haunt me for the rest of my life. The machine extracts something from Dr. Chen, his memories, his knowledge, his very soul, and feeds it directly into the Jish. I can see his life force being drained away, leaving behind an empty shell that still breathes but no longer contains anything human. The Jish that receives his memories grows stronger, more solid. It absorbs Dr. Chen's expertise in glaciology, his knowledge of the park, his understanding of federal protocols. When the process is complete, the creature stands up and speaks in Dr. Chen's voice. Phase 2 enhancement successful, it reports to the technicians. Human knowledge integration at 97% efficiency. They're not just killing people. They're stealing everything that makes them human and using it to make the Jish smarter and more dangerous. And the government is helping them do it. I need to get this evidence out, but first I have to find out how deep this goes. I use my federal access codes to hack into one of the computer terminals in the corridor. What I find in the classified files makes me understand the true scope of what's happening here. Project Shadowfall has been running for 40 years. The government has been providing the Jish with test subjects in exchange for their cooperation in developing new weapons and intelligence-gathering techniques. The enhanced Jish can infiltrate any organization, impersonate any person, and extract information from anyone. But according to the most recent files, something has gone wrong. The enhanced Jish are becoming too intelligent, too independent. They're starting to question why they should serve their human partners instead of the other way around. The facility's alarm system suddenly activates. Red lights flash in the corridor, and an automated voice announces, "Security breach detected. All personnel to emergency stations. Lockdown initiated." Heavy doors slam shut at both ends of the corridor. I'm trapped, and they know I'm here. Through the window into the enhancement chamber, I can see the Jish turning toward my location. Even through the reinforced glass, I can feel them sensing my presence. The elevator at the end of the corridor opens, and 3 figures step out. 2 are government agents in black tactical gear. The third is something wearing the face of Director Hayes, my dead former boss. "Agent Nightshade," the Hayes creature says, "you've seen too much. But don't worry, your knowledge and expertise won't be wasted. The collective will make good use of everything you've learned." The agents raise their weapons, but they're not pointing them at me. They're pointing them at the Hayes creature. "Sir," one of them says, "our orders were to bring her in alive for processing." The Hayes creature turns its black eyes toward the agents. "Plans have changed. We no longer require human cooperation." That's when I understand what's really happening. The Jish aren't serving the government anymore. They've taken over. The enhanced Jish, wearing Director Hayes' face, moves faster than anything human could. It reaches out with one hand and touches the first agent on the forehead. The man's scream cuts off instantly as something dark flows from the creature into him. His eyes turn black, and when he straightens up, he's no longer human. The second agent fires his weapon, but the bullets pass through the Hayes creature like it's made of smoke. The creature smiles and gestures toward the man. Shadows pour from the walls, wrapping around the agent like living ropes. I watch in horror as they drain the life from him, leaving another empty shell behind. "You see, Agent Nightshade," the creature says, turning back toward me, "we no longer need human permission to harvest souls. The technology you helped us develop has made us independent." I'm pressed against the reinforced window, trapped between the creature and the enhancement chamber behind me. But I notice something the Hayes creature doesn't. The Jish in the chamber are agitated, moving restlessly in their containment harnesses. The alarm isn't just for my security breach. Something else is wrong. The facility's power grid is failing, I say, reading the status displays on the wall monitors. "Your enhancement technology is destabilizing." The creature's expression flickers for a moment, and I catch a glimpse of something vast and alien behind Hayes' stolen features. A temporary setback. The backup generators will maintain primary functions. But I can see the truth in the readouts. The enhancement process requires massive amounts of power, and the glacier's natural electromagnetic field is interfering with their equipment. The Jish have made themselves dependent on technology they don't fully understand. That's their weakness. The window behind me suddenly cracks. The enhanced Jish in the chamber are growing more agitated, their technological implants sparking and failing. Without the stabilizing influence of the power grid, they're losing control of their augmented abilities. I back away from the window as more cracks appear. The Hayes creature realizes what's happening at the same moment I do. The containment system is failing. "Initiate emergency protocols." It commands, but there's no one left to hear. The human technicians are either dead or converted, and the converted humans don't have the knowledge to operate the complex systems. The window explodes inward in a shower of reinforced glass. Enhanced Jish pour through the opening, but they're not the controlled, intelligent creatures from moments before. The power failure has driven them into a feeding frenzy, and they're consuming everything in sight, including each other. I dive to the side as one of them lunges for me, its technological implants shooting sparks. The corridor fills with shadow and chaos as the creatures turn on their former partners. The haze creature tries to assert control, but the enhanced Jish are beyond command now. I spot an emergency access panel and smash it open with the butt of my gun. Inside are manual controls for the facility's systems, including the main power grid. If I can overload the generators, it might destabilize all their enhancement technology at once. A shadow creature with glowing circuit patterns grafted into its body spots me at the control panel. It moves toward me with predatory intent, but its augmentations are malfunctioning, causing it to flicker between solid and incorporeal states. I fire my remaining rounds at the creature, not to hurt it, but to force it to go incorporeal. While it's in shadow form, it can't physically interact with anything, including me. I use those few seconds to reach the power controls. The system requires a federal authorization code to access the main generators. I input my old FBI credentials and pray they still work. The display flashes green. Access granted. Behind me, the enhanced Jish are tearing each other apart in their feeding frenzy. The haze creature is trying to restore order, but without the technological enhancement network, it's just another shadow being, powerful but not omnipotent. I initiate an overload sequence in the main generators. Warning lights flash throughout the facility as power surges through systems never meant to handle such loads. The enhancement chambers begin to explode one by one, and the Jish connected to them shriek in rage and pain. The haze creature finally notices what I'm doing and charges toward me, abandoning all pretense of humanity. It's an 8-foot shadow with too many teeth and claws like broken glass. But as it reaches for me, the power grid hits critical overload. Every piece of enhancement technology in the facility explodes simultaneously. The blast wave throws me against the wall, and the last thing I see before losing consciousness is the haze creature being torn apart by its own failing implants. I wake up 12 hours later to the sound of helicopters. Real ones this time, with legitimate government markings. Someone finally noticed that an entire classified facility had gone dark. The rescue team finds me half buried in debris, suffering from hypothermia and shock, but alive. Most of the facility has collapsed into the glacier, and the enhancement chambers are nothing but twisted metal and melted ice. The bodies they recover are either empty shells or unidentifiable remains. The official report lists it as a catastrophic equipment failure during routine research operations. The missing researchers are declared victims of an industrial accident. My involvement is classified at the highest levels, and I'm debriefed by agents who ask very specific questions about what I saw and what I remember. I tell them exactly what happened, but I can see in their eyes that they don't believe the full truth. Or maybe they do believe it, and that scares them even more. 3 weeks later, I'm back on duty, but everything has changed. The shadow creatures are gone from this facility, but I know they're not extinct. The enhancement technology failed, but the basic Jish are still out there, and now they know that humans make effective partners or prey. I've developed what the doctors call enhanced sensitivity to electromagnetic anomalies. What that really means is that I can sense when the Jish are near. It's like a constant, low-level headache that gets worse when they're hunting. The government has reassigned me to a desk job in Anchorage, supposedly for my own safety. But I know the real reason. They're afraid of what I might find if I keep investigating. My FBI records have been sealed, and my federal access codes have been revoked. Officially, Agent Diana Nightshade never existed. But I'm still a park ranger, and I still have a job to do. The wilderness is full of secrets, and some of those secrets have learned to wear human faces. Last week, I got a report of missing campers near Denali. The description of their abandoned campsite matched what I found at Malaspina Glacier. No footprints leading away, no signs of struggle, just empty tents and the faint impression of shadows in the snow. I requested permission to investigate. My supervisor, a man I've known for 3 years, smiled when he denied my request. But his smile was too wide, and his eyes were completely black. I don't sleep well anymore. Every shadow could be hiding something that was once human, or something that's pretending to be human. The enhanced Jish might be gone, but their basic cousins are still learning, still adapting, still hungry. And somewhere in the government, In agencies that officially don't exist, people are probably trying to rebuild what was destroyed under the glacier. Because the potential of the Gish as weapons is too tempting to abandon, and humans have never been good at learning from their mistakes. My name is Diana Nightshade, and I used to think government conspiracy theories were paranoid delusions. Now I know that sometimes the conspiracy is real, and sometimes it's not run by humans at all. The shadows are watching, they're always watching, and they remember everything they steal from us. I carry a different kind of weapon now, not just my service pistol, but emergency flares and high-powered flashlights. Light disrupts their ability to maintain solid form, at least temporarily. It's not much protection, but it's all I have. Tonight, I'm driving back to the glacier. My official assignment is environmental monitoring, but my real purpose is to make sure nothing survived the facility's destruction. The Gish are patient predators, and they might be rebuilding in the ruins. As I drive through the Alaskan night, my headache intensifies. Something is out there in the darkness, keeping pace with my vehicle. I check my mirrors and see nothing but empty road. But in the distance, barely visible against the star-filled sky, shadows are moving across the snow with purpose and intelligence. They're following me, learning from me, preparing for whatever comes next. The conspiracy is real, the monsters are real, and I'm the only one who knows the truth. But I'm not giving up. Someone has to stand between the shadows and the innocent people they hunt. Someone has to remember what happened under the glacier and make sure it never happens again. My name is Diana Nightshade, and I'm going back to work.